Hello my friends, welcome back. In some of the previous videos I started sharing some stories about some of these mysterious lands of Russia. The Puturana Plateau, the Taimyr Peninsula and its inhabitants. One of them in particular, its most ancient inhabitants, continuously up to this day, the Nganasan people, who have lived in those areas for thousands of years, 5 to 7, even more thousand years according to some. And they have survived for such a long time in this territory that is very, very harsh. The winters are extremely cold. And they have survived many of the other tribes who are living in more or less the same areas, in the surroundings, and have some of them disappeared. How did they manage to survive for such a long time? Well, in thousands of years, the Nganasan people have developed a unique and so interesting and deep, profound culture filled with unusual and wonderful traditions. And I would like today to share one of these traditions, because I personally believe that this is something that for us nowadays is so relevant. For the people and for the world nowadays, this is so important. This is what the world now needs and what the people need, in my view. Of course, this culture is very distant, is very far from us in space and time and in understanding. Some things are not easy to understand, easy to comprehend or to agree with, and we don't necessarily have to. But it is also too easy to immediately point the finger at and judge it if we don't understand it. So please, I just encourage you not to do that, and instead try to understand the idea behind it. Because what the world needs right now, as I was mentioning before, is not the tradition itself, literally, but the concept, the idea behind it. But before I tell that story, I think it's important to share a couple of other elements of the Nganasan culture and of their worldview. And one of these things, it's something that all ancient cultures and all tribal people around the world and all animistic and shamanic beliefs and cultures have in common. And what is it? It is the worshipping, in one way or another, the worshipping of the ancestors. This was something very important within the Nganasan people as well, and they used to know on average up to 15 generations of their ancestors. 15, sometimes even more, 17, which is something absolutely mind-blowing. It's something that nowadays we would not be able to comprehend. It's something out of this world. And this knowledge of their ancestors was represented in a symbolic way on special necklaces that they used to wear, that used to sort of hang down then their chest in sort of half moon shapes, going from a bigger one to a smaller one, a smaller one, a smaller one, hanging down. And on each one of them it was symbolized, represented certain elements of their ancestors. As I said, in a symbolic way, because they never really developed a writing system. Now, very sadly, this is something that nowadays doesn't exist anymore. It's a knowledge that is lost even among the Nganasan people. So, now, take this thing that I just said and remember it. It will come out later again. Now, this sort of necklace that they used to wear is a decoration, part of their traditional way of dressing, but it is not the only decoration that they had. They had many others. And their clothes were made primarily of leather, of the skin of the reindeer, that has this sort of a whitish color. And they start their life, let's say, with their clothing that is just it. It's pure color, the pure color of the leather, of the skin of the reindeer, right? And then, throughout their life, they would start adding decorations onto their clothing, in form of sort of these textiles, short textiles in different shapes and colors, attached to different parts, on the sleeves, going around like this, in different areas, or around the body like this, or maybe strips in some areas, different ways. But it's like these sort of textiles that are sewed, on the clothes. And they would act for them as an ID. Same thing as it is like an ID for us nowadays, or a business card in some way, like combined. They would represent the social status of a certain person. So, if one of them would meet someone whom he doesn't know, just by looking at the person, how this person is dressed, you could immediately say, "Oh, okay." You meet maybe a woman, and you could maybe understand how old is she. Or you can see if she's single, you can see if she's married, maybe you get married and you get one decoration, you get, your husband dies and you become a widow, you get another decoration. You have your first child, you have another decoration. You become a grandmother, you have another decoration. So you could immediately say something of someone just by looking at the way they're dressed. And many other things, of course, incorporated, let's say, in this tradition. So, towards the end of the life of a person, their clothes were filled up with all these sort of decorations, and they're all colorful and blue and red and things around. Wonderful, wonderful. But the kids, the newborn babies, they would have nothing, no decoration on their clothes whatsoever, until the age of 3, 4. Why? Well, because in the view of these people, until that age, a baby, a person, cannot be considered fully human. Or maybe, to say it in another way, their soul is not still complete. Their soul is not still fully human. Now this, as I said at the very beginning, it's easy to judge. But we have to think of it from a point of view of, imagine this area very north of Siberia, how harsh it is, the environment. And the high mortality rate among children, it's something that we all know about. It's not something that was, happening only in one place rather than the other. It was a common thing in all parts of the world. In the very north because of the cold, in some other places because of some disease, in some other, many reasons. But the mortality rate was high in the ancient times of kids. So they getting to the age of 4 was a great success, and it's already an age where the kid, he can start already doing things by himself. And that would be also the age when he would first receive, at first, let's say, decoration that would represent his entering into this world as a human being now. And so, when the Nganasan people, when someone used to die, they didn't have a sort of burial ceremony, because in these areas, like in Tibet, you can't bury someone in the ground because of the environment. So they used to build this sort of how you call them in English, this sort of huts, these teepees, let's say, wooden, around a tree or in some other place, as a special sort of hut for the dead person. They would do a ceremony and they would never go back. Never. They would never go back to see the grave again. Which is interesting, right? There is a worshipping of the ancestors, but at the same time there is no attachment in going back to a grave of a loved one. And this used to happen with adults, but the kids that passed away, these graves were not put on the ground in sort of these huts like for the adults, but the graves of the kids would be put on the top of a tree or somewhere high. Why? Because their soul is weak. It doesn't have the power, it doesn't have yet the strength to push itself up into the heavens. So by putting the grave up, elevated, you would kickstart the soul to go high. Which is very, very interesting, very interesting. It clearly represents very well this connection that exists between the view of a soul not being fully yet complete, not being fully human, and then the funerary sort of the ceremony for kids. It's all connected. It's all, as I said before, a very complex culture. But now the main point that I wanted to discuss from the beginning, this beautiful tradition that nowadays we need more than ever. the summers in this part of the world are very short and not so warm. And so the people, they try to collect and preserve as much food and different kind of products that they need for the very long winter. Very long, very cold, very dark. If throughout the winter the wise person of the tribe would see that the products are not enough to make it through the winter for the whole community, they would sacrifice certain members of their society. Who? You might ask. And the answer would be clear: the weakest members of their society. As you, let's say, would do, right? But who are the weakest members of the society? Usually everyone says the same. When I sort of share this story among people, 99% of them always say the old ones, the elderly people, are the weakest ones. No. They kill all the children. Why? Well, one of the reasons you already know. As I mentioned before, yeah. Another reason is that they would say that making children, making babies is easy. Anytime you want to make a baby, a new baby, you can make. But to have an elder person that has the wisdom, has all the knowledge of their tradition, that is something that you cannot simply make like that. And it is something that you need to preserve. Now, it is interesting because, as I said before, the Nganasan people never really developed a writing system. Why? Well, main reason is that because they didn't need to, simply. They just didn't. And as many of the societies of the remote times, their knowledge was very often printed within their stories, their storytelling, their tales, their legends. And the elderly people, the elders, they would always be great storytellers. And this would pass from generation to generation. And the Nganasan people, as when I was there last time, they said, when we will have no more elders that will be able to tell our stories and our tales and our legends, from that moment on, our people will vanish, will disappear within 2 generations. Are there any elders left? Unfortunately, not. Some of the last elders passed away some years ago. Of the male ones, there are only few grandmothers left that you can count on your fingers. But we could say that they're all gone. So, are the Nganasan people, the Nganasan traditions disappearing? Yes, they are. So they were correct, in fact. Give it 1 generation, 2 generations more, and they will be gone. And this is very sad. And their stories, and the knowledge within these stories that they pass generation to generation is something absolutely wonderful, of such a complex and deep, filled with meanings. Just beautiful. And it is very sad. I feel lucky and blessed to know that I managed to witness these things. Some of the tribes that used to live around the Nganasan people didn't really have this tradition of trying to take care of the elderly people in such strong way, and that is the reason why they disappeared. So, as I said at the beginning, don't judge, please, the tradition. Try to understand its meaning, try to understand the idea behind it. And this is something that I believe we need now, more than ever. Learning our past, our traditions, where we come from. We need to preserve this knowledge, we need to preserve our elders. Well, thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.